And I want to start by paying tribute to you all for all that you've done for your time as president as well. You've been an invaluable source of strength and wisdom during a hugely challenging time. You've provided a great model for your successors, always engaged, always available, and always supportive. This woman has taken every single call, WhatsApp, whether she's on leave or not leave. In fact, I don't think anyone took any leave over the past year as far as our executive is concerned. And I also want to, say how kind and given everyone has been with their time as well. Often given up valuable time with their own families in order to make sure the workers in Wales are kept safe at all times. So thank you, sister. I also want to thank our General Counsel for their willingness to shift to a very different way of working and for making that change so effectively. And finally, thanks to the Executive Committee. As I say, without such a flexible and committed exec, we would have struggled to have functioned and delivered anywhere near as well as we have done during the pandemic. Having an active relationship between staff, the exec affiliates and wider social partners has unquestionably made the Wales TUC stronger, more open, more visible, and we have now got to make sure that we continue to build on this. As Ruth has said, we can feel hugely proud of how our movement in Wales has responded to the extraordinary situation over the last year. We have fought for our members in every single sector, every worker out there. And I want to pay tribute to the many union reps and members who we sadly lost during the period of the pandemic. Our thoughts and best wishes are with their families and with their colleagues. As our movement says, today we remember and honour the dead, but renew our vow to keep fighting for the living. Safer workplaces and better conditions, including prioritisation of mental health support services for working people and better support for people suffering from long COVID, will continue to be our primary focus in the coming months. Many unions have seen incredible spikes in their membership and their activist space levels as the crisis has made people realise that they need that collective voice at work. Diverse and growing worker voices from all sectors and parts of the economy are now shifting the dial of trade union membership and activism, which makes me super proud of our movement. It tells me that our message of unity and solidarity is reaching each and every person out there, the masses, the working people of Wales. There is growing recognition that there is something fundamentally unhealthy about the control and one-sided flexibility that has been gifted to bosses over the last 40 years, and this must change. And there is a real sense now of momentum to organise behind a comprehensive re-evaluation of the power relations, those power dynamics at work. We need to seize that opportunity to continue to build, grow and win on key issues that workers care about. As General Secretary of the Wales TUC, I am particularly proud of the adjustments that our team has made to ensure that we've continued to support the movement here in Wales. There's no better example of this than the Wales Union Learning Fund programme, which continues to go from strength to strength. We increased our support of the Wolf projects during the pandemic, supporting those without online offers to develop digital and online learning. And we've built and hosted new resources on our website to ensure continued access for members. The result is that despite the huge disruptions brought about by COVID, Wolf learner numbers have doubled since 2019. The continued success of Wolf stands in stark contrast to the shameful decision by the UK government to defund union learning in England, a decision that illustrates the benefits of having worked in partnership with the Welsh Government to develop a very distinctive Welsh approach. Meanwhile, the Wales TUC team has prioritised providing crucial support, information and resources, both on how best to respond to the particular challenges of the COVID crisis, but also on our non-COVID priorities, with new toolkits for reps on supporting older workers, tackling problem gambling, addressing mental health issues, and the just published yesterday, Engaging Young Workers. And it would be remiss of me not to take a moment to reflect on the fact that today marks 1 year since the brutal murder of George Floyd and the activism that followed through the Black Lives Matter movement and the activity that followed on our streets and in our workplaces. Black and white workers united, fighting against racism, bigotry and prejudice. And I'm proud of the family campaigns for justice that our movement here in Wales has supported, including the Justice for Christopher Capessa campaign, the Free Sianda, Justice for Mahmoud Hassan, and Justice for Moeed Bashir. We have also worked closely with government to develop the Waste, Race and Disability Action Plans, and we now look forward to working with ministers and wider social partners to deliver on these plans for social justice and equality in Wales. We have a broad and exciting range of motions and statements to debate over the next 2 days, and these are going to set the agenda for the next 12 months until we meet again, hopefully in person, in Llandudno next May, to do it all again. But this time, we'll be a lot closer than having to do this virtually. Inevitably, a significant number of those motions reference the fallout from the pandemic, and equally, inevitably, that fallout will dominate Welsh politics for the foreseeable future. So I want to return to Ruth's theme of asking, what lessons can we take from the pandemic? And while it's probably too soon to start speaking definitively on this subject, I want to offer 3 points. First, key workers are undervalued. For too long, our labour market has rewarded all of the wrong things. This has become a bit of a cliche now. Everyone agrees with it, or at least they do in theory. Care workers, shop workers, nurses, porters, cleaners, postal workers, the list is endless. When everything else stopped last year, these people kept going, often at enormous personal risk. But we all know that in some of these sectors, pay and working conditions are absolutely appalling. And we also know that the impact of the crisis has fallen disproportionately on BME and younger workers. That vocal and visible support of claps and the gorgeous, colourful rainbows for key workers has not, sadly, yet translated into policies and funding at the kind of scale that will make a real difference to working people's lives. People are still working too many hours on too little pay, with almost a quarter of workers not even earning the real living wage. Many remain in insecure work, relying on food and fuel banks and social security to make ends meet. This is the reality of the many working people and families in Wales. Poverty and inequality is the real lived experience. We need to remember who Wales's key workers are. Obviously, our NHS and our social care workforce were at the front line of this crisis, but there were so many others who should be recognised and properly rewarded. Our food processing workers, our distribution workers, our utilities workforce, their role in this crisis cannot be forgotten. And government needs to now look at ways that investment can tangibly benefit these workers' lives too. Investing in things like affordable housing, public transport, a more robust social wage would actually be a very good place to start. Secondly, many of our support systems for workers are completely broken. We've got the worst sick pay system amongst any comparable country in the world, and yet absolutely nothing has been done to fix it. We've had to create all kinds of different and often complex and fiddly schemes to make up for the fact that we simply don't ensure workers get proper sick pay. And when those temporary schemes are wound down in the next few months, we'll be back to where we started, thanks to a UK government that seems determined to learn nothing from the crisis. Finally, government action does matter. If the ambition, the desire, and the political will is genuinely there, then governments can act, and act decisively, provide support where is needed, and tackle injustices swiftly, including the UK government delivering the employment bill that they promised us, legislating for a £10 an hour minimum wage, and ditching their rotten public sector pay freeze. Let's look at furlough, the business bailouts, the vaccine rollout, and the success in getting homeless people off the streets. It turns out the homelessness was a political choice after all. Who knew, eh? The big risk now is that we slip back into these old ideas that have dominated politics over the last 40 years. The ideas that say the state is just a caretaker for capital. We must be much more ambitious, more creative, and more driven than that. We must ensure that there's no backsliding into the outdated free market dogmas that have undermined quality of life and social mobility in Wales for decades. Admittedly, this will be an uphill battle, given the nature of the government we're dealing with in Westminster. But I'm quietly confident that the newly formed cabinet will be ready to fight for Wales. I'm delighted to say that we will be joined tomorrow morning by the First Minister. Mark can be justly proud of the endorsement that he has won from the Welsh public earlier this month. His careful and considered approach to managing the pandemic has been a welcome contrast with the chaos and the cronyism at the end of the M4. The First Minister and Welsh Labour now have a very clear mandate. Our message from this Congress is that it should not be afraid to use it. We want to see swift and meaningful action on Labour's manifesto commitments, delivering on the Fair Work agenda, tackling the shamefully poor working conditions in areas like social care, rebuilding an economy that's equitable and has social justice and equality at its heart, an economy that works for everyone, with a clear message that no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, Wales looks after its workers and communities and values their labour. We stand ready to work in social partnership with the Welsh Government to do this, but it will mean learning from the mistakes of the last recovery. If we're going to come out of the COVID crisis with a fairer economy, a more equal Wales, then we must confront the grim realities of our labour market and target job quality, not just any old unemployment alone. There is a great opportunity now for progress in areas like social care. We fought for and established a Fair Work Forum for social care, which brings government, employers and unions to look at how we can give greater worker power in the sector and improve pay and conditions. The Welsh Government has committed to paying care workers the real living wage by the end of this term. But this will be a real missed opportunity if we don't use this major intervention in the sector to put us on a very clear path to a proper sectoral collective bargaining arrangement for all outsourced care, which must be one of our priorities. Just like in the public sector, care workers in the private and third sectors deserve a collective say over their pay, terms and conditions. Implementing the real living wage simply isn't enough. They need fair work. We've achieved some great things over this past year, including the creation of a culture contract. We now want to see something similar for a workers' charter developed for the hospitality sector, a sector with a significant number of younger workers, often in insecure work with no real career pathway. We want to work with government to help strengthen the support for the many people classed as self-employed, working across the many different types of supply chains, often delivering work on behalf of businesses in receipt of government grant support. We've worked with government to ensure support is available for these types of workers, but there's always more that can be done. We want to see workers like taxi drivers, still not able to make a real living wage, continue to have a voice at the decision-making table of local council planning. Progress on the Welsh Government's Fair Work agenda has been stop and start over the last 2 years, since the Fair Work Commission published its ambitious set of recommendations. The new social partnership bill is a chance to give some proper momentum and to fire it up to deliver at full speed. The bill has the potential to be a landmark piece of legislation that will make a real difference to how decisions are reached on policy issues in Wales. Or it could become an exercise in box ticking and window dressing. The next few months will be crucial in deciding in which way this goes. We've made the case for a strong and effective bill and will continue to do so the proposals make their way through the Senedd. Done correctly, it will amplify workers' voices across all public bodies in Wales, and through its procurement provisions, it will use the power of the public purse to influence employment practices in the private sector. The bill itself is just one part of the wider Fair Work agenda. But it represents a real opportunity. It's a real opportunity for workers in Wales to start to claw back some of that control that has been taken away from them. It will enhance the ability of unions to make sure the workers' voices are being heard when decisions are being made and the workers' voices are at the table. The bill is ultimately a worthwhile attempt to do what can be done with the powers that the Welsh Government has to address our increasingly dysfunctional labour market. The divisions in that labour market have never been clearer. For example, only a third of people worked from home during the pandemic, and yet it's often discussed like it was the majority of workers, and we all know that really wasn't the case. More importantly, there's a growing divide between those who work in organisations whose pay terms and conditions are shaped by good industrial relations and those that aren't. If you've worked the majority of your career in the former, it's really hard to understand what it's like to work in a job where you don't have a written contract, where you're paid a day rate, where you don't know if you're employed or self-employed, and where you have no sick pay or leave or many other employment rights. Unions need to be at the table to remind government that this is the reality for major parts of the labour market. We must also recognise that the Fair Work Agenda and the Social Partnership Bill are not just things that the Welsh Government does for us or on our behalf. They are opportunities for us, and they also represent some real challenges to us too. We need to do everything we can in the coming months to prepare to meet those challenges and to demonstrate our capacity to deliver change. I've never been so much more confident in our collective ability to make a difference for our members. And we may well have to wait a little longer, a bit more time for a better chance to tackle some of those political and structural systemic barriers that have long undermined worker power in Wales. As for now, some of those significant powers remain in the hands of the UK government. But we will and can get there if we continue to build our collective strength to organise across each and every workplace and community to ensure that every worker who's not yet a member joins a trade union, the most important and valuable membership available for working people in UK. So let's work together over the next 2 days to set an ambitious, equitable and progressive agenda for rigorous change, and then work together over the next 12 months to make that agenda a reality. Diolch yn fawr.